Hello, everybody, and welcome to the February 15th meeting of the Thurston Regional Housing Council. Glad to see so many faces out there. I want to start the meeting with a quick check-in and introductions. Why don't we start with Olympia this time?
Hi, everybody. Danny Madrone with the City of Olympia. I am accompanied by Mayor Pro Tem Clark Gilman, Jacinda Stelgis, who is our Affordable Housing Programs Manager. Did I get that? Okay, excellent. And Rich Hoy, our interim assistant city manager.
Great. All right. How about Thurston County?
Hello, I'm Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner, and we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez. We have Tom Webster, and is that it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
All right. Tumwater?
Hi, Michael Althauser, joined by Joan Cathy. And then I think we're also expecting Brad Medrud from our planning department, but I don't think he's been able to join quite yet.
All righty. I don't see Yelm on the line yet, so we'll go to Lacey, and I'm Carolyn Cox, the Lacey representative. I don't know whether Andy Ryder is going to be able to join us. I hear Rick shaking his head. He's tied up with legislative matters. I have here Rick Walk, our acting city manager, and Ryan Andrews, who is our planning manager for the city. So I'm an esteemed company here. So welcome, welcome. And has everybody had a chance to review the agenda? Okay. I do want to take a little time at the end to bring up one thing about the charter, but I can do that at good of the order, I think. An idea there. And can I have a motion to approve the January 25th minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. Any comments on the minutes? Other than they were just dandy? Okay. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Sounds like that was unanimous. All righty. So Tom, looks like the Southport Lansdale Point apartment project proposal is your baby. Are you ready on that?
Yes, I am. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. So just a little bit of a follow-up from our conversations from the last couple of weeks around the Southport project. You'll recall last meeting, this group approved providing funding to Southport, and we'll be sending a letter of commitment to Southport for their project. There was a follow-up item from last week in terms of whether our commitment letter needed to indicate whether we were providing a loan or a grant. And Southport reached out to the Department of Commerce and determined that as part of their application, they do need to indicate whether the funding would be a loan or a grant. That's preliminary. If a change needs to happen to that determination, it can be made before we actually enter into contract. So wanted to bring that back to you. So we are looking for a recommendation from this body on whether that would be a loan or a grant. The tech team talked about this today. I think the recommendation from the tech team is to recommend providing it as a grant. Reduces the administrative burden for the next 22 years to collect a modest amount of interest in that principle. And I know, Rich, if City of Olympia has also been having discussions around whether their portion would be a loan or a grant, if you want to weigh in on where Olympia is on their discussions.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Good evening, everybody. City staff has, upon further review, looking at the loan terms and the administrative burden, relative to the benefit as Tom described. We are also at this point planning to recommend to our council that the Olympia portion also be given in the form of a grant. We discussed that with our RHC reps, Councilmember Madrone and Mayor Pro Tem Gilman yesterday, and with their support, that's what we will be recommending to our full council. on May 7th, March 7th, when this goes forward to our council. So at the tech team, we talked about having both the Olympia and the regional portions move forward as a grant.
Okay. Any thoughts, council members? Danny?
Yeah, I'll just share, just from our discussion yesterday, like at first the idea of a loan did seem like a great idea in terms of reinvestment and all of that, but we're limited by what the terms can be. We're not able to set those ourselves. So that is, just a part of our decision making. If we could do something that worked better for us, that would be our preference, but we can't. And so we're happy to move forward with a grant.
Great, okay. Well, I think it makes sense because there's administrative costs to administering a loan as well. So anybody have a thought in a different direction?
No, I agree.
Okay,
I'm in agreement as well.
okay. So Tom, would you like a motion on that?
You took a motion last week, so as long as if there's just the thumbs up, if everyone's in agreement, we will write the commitment letter to indicate that that will be provided as a grant.
Okay, and remind me the full amount of the grant?
$1,325,000. And then Olympia's portion is the same, so it's 50%.
Okay. All right. And, okay, we're good. All right, well, I think that's a good outcome, and hopefully they'll be pleased that it's a grant too.
Yep. So I have that commitment letter already, and so I will send that over to you, Chair Cox, for your signature from the RHC. And
Okay.
get that closed up.
All right, sounds good. Is Keely with us?
Yes, join.
I'm here.
Okay, she did come in. All right, and so welcome Keely, and I think Brad Medrube has joined us. David Bain, since we did welcomes and introductions, so hello and welcome everybody. If we're ready to move on to the RHC advisory boards, then that's Keely and Jacinda on that.
All right, I'll start. I'm actually I'm not going to start.
Keely, if I can start if you would like that. Okay. Okay. So we have provided in the packet all of the applications, all of the applicants for the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, excuse me. So we had, I think, about 23 or 26 applicants. We are recommending 13. And you all will have noticed as you scroll through those applications, at the top of there, it says recommended for anyone who has been recommended. So just a reminder that we did prioritize having some representation from each of the jurisdictions. We also prioritized lived experience, and then also tried to look at rounding out our board in terms of subject matter expertise. Oh, and also, excuse me, prioritize HAT representation as well. So the recommendations do hit all of those high points, have HAT representation, lived experience, subject matter experts. And then again, on the Affordable Housing Board, we are recommending 13 individuals be placed. The charter allows for up to 15, excuse me, up to 14, sorry. So there is one position that would be left open if this body wants to do some additional recruiting, and the charter does allow for that semi-annually. And I think other than that, if Tom has anything to weigh in, and then we're also available, Tom and I, to answer any questions.
Yeah, I did want to weigh in on the affordable housing, to make one kind of correction to your list. Is you'll see Trudy Sukup from Homes First is listed as Olympia. We're actually showing her as a Lacey rep. Homes First is based in Lacey. So that was an error in putting that together. So we do have one representative from Tumwater, one from Lacey, and then one from Yelm as well. So that was important for the jurisdictional representation. So I wanted to make that correction. I will note we didn't have a lot of applications from people in Lacey or Tumwater or South County. So I think that is something, as we were going through those interviews, Chair Cox and Vice Chair Mejia, we spent 8 hours Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last week doing interviews. I
Yeah.
thought they were very positive. But I think there was a recognition of looking for broader jurisdictional representation, but we didn't have a lot of applicants. We only had the one applicant from someone from Tumwater. Affordable housing, we had 2 applicants, both kind of a Lacey, Olympia kind of split, lived in Lacey, worked in Olympia, or vice versa. So Trudy Sukup is representing Lacey, since Homes First is based in Lacey. So I wanted to clarify that.
And we do have at least one Lacey UGA person who was in the list for affordable housing as well.
And I can speak really quickly about the Homeless Services Advisory Board. I apologize. I'm at a convention center in Tacoma for the Anchor Community Initiative this afternoon. And so that was all the noise that you heard behind me.
Gotcha.
Yes, and so the Homeless Service Advisory Board also same kinds of criteria and for eligibility on that board, and it's a very wide distribution in terms of diversity and age and all other identities, and then a range of experience. 2 of the members that we're recommending are actually active members of the Lived Experience Steering Committee, soon to be renamed, and so we've met that criteria, which we're really excited to have that connection with that group because they are working really hard right now as their own committee. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the Homeless Services Advisory Board, but just wanted to shout out the Lived Experience Steering Committee.
Great. Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, the one other thing we wanted to talk about at Tech Team is because we wanted to stagger terms, we're going to have some people have 2-year terms and then other people have 3-year terms. Normally, these will be 3-year terms. And so for the Affordable Housing Board, they're ordered based on the scores that came in. And so the first 7 people listed would be recommended for a 3-year term with people 8 through 13 for a 2-year term. And then for the Homeless Services Board, 1 through 6 would be a 3-year term, and then 7 through 11 would be a 2-year term recommendation, so that we can stagger. So not everyone's coming off the board at the same time. And so that was the recommendation from the Tech Team in terms of how to make that distinction between the 2- and 3-year terms.
Okay. So questions, comments about the recommendations that were put forth by the interview team?
I've got a question, Carolyn.
Yeah.
With the 2- and 3-year terms, is the expectation that it'll be an annual recruitment process, even though we're starting with 2- and 3-year terms? Like nobody's getting a 1-year term. So is there an expectation that extra seats would get filled, or maybe people won't fulfill their whole term?
Well,
Yeah, so the way the charter is written, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Tom.
The way the charter is written is that it does allow for semi-annual recruitment. So if spots are available, that we would recruit semi-annually if spots were available. So if people drop off or if there's positions available, we could do that twice a year.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everybody who did all the interviews. It can be a lot to coordinate all of those time slots and then to sit through all these short interviews to try to get a sense of a person. So I really appreciate the time that everybody took to do that.
Well, thanks, Danny. This kind of gets to what I was going to bring up at the end, but I think we may want to take a look at the charter language and try to just nail down more tightly this intent that we do recruit for to make sure we have representation as well as possible from all the jurisdictions. I don't know how you all feel about that, but I think if we're to be a regional council, we need to make that strong commitment to have all our jurisdictions represented by these groups if possible. So is that, Carolina, is that a finger raised or just, okay. So does anybody have a comment about that or a different thought? Well, if not, I'd like to ask the tech team to come back with a proposal on how to beef up that language just a little bit to make it, to put some shalls in there and make it clear that we do have mid-year and annual recruitments. And I'd like to see us each as a jurisdiction committing to doing some outreach and shaking the bushes to find people to serve on these boards. So. All right. You all are so agreeable today.
I guess, can I, Chair Cox, can I just jump in? And so we did, in your packet, there is the draft charter and the set of policies and procedures, which are hopefully pretty standard, mostly come from the county's policies around cybersecurity and public records requests and those types of things. So if I can share my screen, I just want to make sure we're clear on what you're looking for is, can folks see my screen with the section of the charter? Is that this board membership should include representatives, and this is for the Affordable Housing Board. You're looking for at least one member should be a resident of an with the different jurisdictions. You're looking at that to be shall your resident. I guess I just want to make sure I'm clear on the areas that you want to have beefed up.
Yeah, and everybody feel free to jump in on this. I think that's a good change there. And I'd like to see a bullet on each jurisdiction will, commit to recruiting representatives to both advisory boards to help ensure that we have geographic diversity.
I like that second recommendation. I get concerned about the first suggestion of changing that to shall, just because what if nobody applies? Like you can't force participation into something. I just would want to make sure that we don't lock ourselves into an impossible situation. But I do think it's fair that we include in there that each jurisdiction, give it our best in terms of recruitment to make sure that we're all represented.
Good point, Danny. Rick, and then Keely.
Oh, I think Keely had her hand up first. I'll defer to Keely first and then.
All right, Keely.
Thank you, Rick. So I would just want to say, especially for the Homeless Services Advisory Board, that just because someone meets the criteria of being from some other place in the county does not determine that they will de facto become a member of the Homeless Services Advisory Board. There's still eligibility criteria that would need to be met in order to be on the criteria as well, or for a person to be on the board, not just what region they're from, what part of the county they're
And not just a warm body from Bucota, huh?
right.
Okay. Rick?
With the, the sentiment of should versus shall, I just want to maybe throw this out for the RHC for consideration is if it's shall, you have especially in the Home Advisory Board group, you have a minimum of 8 and maximum of 14. And so if you have it as shall and there aren't initially a recruitment for somebody from Tumwater or the South County or somewhere else to fill that seat, it could still remain open and the board could function. But it also, I think it's incumbent upon all the jurisdictions to assist the RHC tech team in that recruitment and placement and recommendations for folks on the board. So even though there is that concern that if you have it as shall and you can't find somebody, you still have a functioning board with a minimum of 8 members and a maximum of 14. So you can kind of reserve some seats for that broader representation.
Okay. And we've got Michael.
Yeah, I hate to wordsmith too much. But like looking at, if I were to just sort of read that subsection, that clause literally, it says that there needs to be a member or an organization that geographically represents each, and then it lists those entities. The first time I read that, I was questioning whether that was looking for a regional organization that operates in every one of those jurisdictions, as opposed to a series of members representing each one of those individually, because it's written in the conjunctive. And so I don't, if we are clarifying that a little bit, I think I know what the intent is. I think the intent is to have like one person from Tumwater, one person from Lacey, and so on and so forth. But the way that it's written, I sort of was questioning whether the intent was to have a regional organization operating countywide as a result of that, for what it's worth.
Okay. Well, maybe it's possible to clean that up a little bit. Brad, I saw your hand go up and then down, but did you?
Well, I was hoping Councilmember Althauser was asking the question I was going to ask, but he covered part of what I was thinking. But my other thought was we do have a requirement in there. I think it was the Affordable Housing Advisory Board that a certain percentage of the members be from the city, live or work in the city of Olympia. So I don't think it's out of line to have a shall statement for residents of Tumwater, Lacey, and Yelm and so forth.
Right. Okay. All right. Does that get you what you need, Tom?
Commissioner has her hand up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was wondering kind of what's the expectation on timeline on kind of going back to when you want this language, Carolyn. Is it like something that can be worked on throughout the year, or is this something that you want approved or seen before we move forward with the appointments?
Tom, correct me. I don't think we actually need to have it before the appointments are made, do we?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
One of the things that in the interlocal agreement, the RHC amendment that is on council agendas, which the Board of County Commissioners approved yesterday, there is language in there that references the charter in terms of the membership. So we will want to have a formal charter that's adopted by this board. I don't know if we can adopt this on an interim basis and work over the next month to get this clarified. So the ILA does reference this charter, but I don't think you need to have that in place necessarily before the members are appointed.
Okay. Well, Lacey's scheduled to vote on the ILA tomorrow. No, yeah, tomorrow. Tumwater, where are you all on that?
We've discussed it at the General Government Committee, and I think it's on the consent calendar for our next full council meeting, which would be this coming Tuesday. Is that right, Brad?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And how about Olympia?
Go ahead, Ray.
March 7th.
March 7th. Okay. Well, maybe would it make sense to maybe have it ready by our first meeting in March?
We can do that.
Okay. Does that give you enough time to breathe?
Sure.
Breathing's important.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, with that then, unless there's any other discussion, could I have a motion to approve the recommended membership of the two RHC advisory boards?
So moved.
Okay. All right. Great. Any other discussion? I will.
I just echo Danny's comments of gratitude for folks who worked on going through these applications. It's an immense amount of work. So thank you to the staff that worked on this, and to everyone who also applied to be on the board. This is a pretty exciting next step, I think. We've been talking about this for a really long time. So this is a really great next step.
It is. And I'm so appreciative of the tech team for all the work they did. And with my co-interviewer, Carolina, you know, we blitzed through a huge number of interviews. But one thing I do want to just enter into the record is our vote today will actually be a recommendation to the county commission, which I think is scheduled on the 28th of February to do the final vote on this. So I think the intention, once we vote and approve on that, is to let the people who were selected and not selected go ahead and know, so we don't leave them hanging. But we did leave them with the understanding there's that one more bureaucratic hurdle that has to happen. So just wanted to get that on the record. So ready to vote? All right. All in favor of the motion to forward both recommendations for filling both of the advisory boards, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everybody. That one was a big lift. Okay, Tom, lead us through the home ARP plan.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for that on the advisory board. So in your packet, there's an executive summary for the home. So under the American Rescue Plan Act, Thurston County received an award of just over $3 million, which was allocated under the Home Investment Partnership Program, which is the federal affordable housing program that we operate. In order to access these funds, we needed to come up with an allocation plan. These funds are intended to assist individuals and households who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, or other vulnerable populations through providing housing, rental assistance, supportive services, non-congregate shelter to reduce homelessness and increase housing stability. So before we could accept these funds, we need to do an allocation plan that required a public participation process, a needs and gaps analysis, and then a plan for how to allocate those funds. So we've been working at the county in conjunction with our stakeholders to go through a process for the last several months. So we've reached out, consulted with the Housing Action Team and various other groups to get input on what are the needs and gaps in our community. And then the gaps analysis, which Alex Purse from our office has really spent a lot of time working on, which we drew a lot from the TRPC housing needs and gaps analysis that was done a couple of years ago, along with the consolidated plan work that the county and city of Olympia are currently doing with a consultant for our HUD 5-year consolidated plans. We drew on a lot of existing data resources, along with data in our homeless management information system to pull this information together. So in the executive summary, we tried to provide some high level data around the needs and gaps, but what we're showing is currently for kind of the current folks in HMIS, a gap of 512 beds for families and 726 beds for single adults. Some key demographics, the report has some more detailed information on this. And so what we're proposing is really for these home ARP funds to allocate minus the 5% that the county needs to administer these funds, 47.5% for supportive services over the next 3 years. So we actually have until 2030 to spend these funds, but we need to submit this plan to HUD by March 31st of this year. So using essentially half of the funds for supportive services over the next 3 years, and then half the funds for development of affordable rental housing. Some of the things that went into that recommendation are the reduction of document recording fees. As we've talked about in the last couple meetings, is really going to impact us. So looking at this as a way to help fill the gap for some of the reduced services from the reduced document recording fees, and feeling that we can spread that out over 3 years. So roughly an additional $500,000 that will be available in our community to support those services that we may struggle to fund with the reduced document recording fee. And then for the development of affordable housing was a big need. We are recommending not to set any priorities or preferences or limitations. One of the things that this plan allows is if you wanted a preference for funds to go to a DV shelter, we would need to identify that at this point in the plan to say that we'd have a preference for that, or a preference for one specific population or one specific activity within supportive services or within a broad affordable housing range. And so we're recommending not to set priorities or preferences or limitations at this time, that we would issue an RFP. If based on the projects that come in, we want to identify a project that does have a preference or limitation, we would then amend our plan down the road to allow for that limitation or preference. The expectation from HUD is that these funds would be used to be made available to serve all eligible populations. So at least one activity would need to be, each population would need to be able to access at least one project or program that is funded with these funds. So at this point, we're recommending keeping it open broadly, issuing an RFP once this is approved by HUD. And then if we need to go back and amend that plan to identify a specific preference or limitation, we would do so. The next steps on this is we will be issuing the plan next Monday, the 20th, putting it out for public comment. There will be a 30-day public comment period. Yesterday, the Board of County Commissioners set a public hearing for March 21st, where we'll accept public comment on this plan before it's submitted to HUD on March 31st. Then hopefully HUD will approve the plan. It's not unexpected if HUD comes back with some questions or some things we need to tweak. That's been a pretty common experience for other jurisdictions around these plans. But when then the hope is after HUD's review period, we would then have access to these funds, and then we would be able to issue an RFP and start awarding those funds. So that's a high level overview of what this plan looks like. It will be made public, posted to our website on Monday of next week, and then go out for public comment. But we have had several conversations with the Housing Action Team, other providers around thinking through how to structure this plan. So happy to answer any questions for folks around this.
Questions? Tom, do you have, I don't want you to put you in a corner here to commit you to like a date that we'll have this money, but given what we know about the speed at which HUD moves, could you give us a rough time frame, like late fall or something like that?
Yeah, my hope was we would hear back, HUD I think has, and Jacinda, correct me if I'm wrong, about 90 days to review this and provide comments. So that's, 3 months puts us into June. So if all goes well and they like our plan, then perhaps by midsummer, I would not be surprised if there's some back and forth. So I think early fall is a realistic time frame for when we would hope to have access to these funds.
Okay. Okay. Any questions or comments on what Tom has laid out? Not seeing any hands raised. Well, again, thank you so much for the work on this. I know that is a big lift too. Are we ready to move on to the Homes First ADU?
All right, great. So this there's a staff report in your meeting packet. We wanted to bring this to your attention. And we've had discussions with the City of Lacey to discuss this at the tech team as well. So the background on this is the City of Lacey made a Community Development Block Grant Award to Homes First in 2020 for about $210,000. That project was initially identified to acquire and rehab homes in Lacey for affordable housing. As we worked through the process with Lacey, they identified that they wanted to construct 2 accessory dwelling units in Lacey on properties they already own. We've been working through with Homes First, the environmental review process, but we've reached a point where new construction is not an eligible activity under CDBG funds. So the CDBG funds that Homes First were awarded cannot be used for the construction of two neighbors ADUs. CDBG can be used for acquisition, it can be used for rehab and other housing costs, but it cannot be used for new construction. So we were wanting to come up with a solution to allow Homes First to move forward with their project and keep that project whole, while also spending Lacey CDBG dollars, the county's CDBG dollars in a timely manner. The county is at a point where we do need to spend our CDBG dollars in order to meet HUD timeliness requirements. So what the request is to the Regional Housing Council is to allocate $107,000 from the 2060 fund balance to be allocated to Homes First for this project. They have other sources from Federal Home that they've received that they can also allocate to this project to make up the full $210,000. In exchange, we would reduce the Homes First CDBG award from Lacey by $107,000 and make that available to another CDBG project available in the county. These funds cannot be used in the city of Olympia because Olympia has their own CDBG funds, but they can be used elsewhere in the county. So Lacey, Tumwater, or unincorporated county, or one of the other smaller cities for an eligible project. Our preference would be that these funds be spent in Lacey. Our preference would be that they would be spent on an affordable housing project, but absent that, they would be available for any eligible CDBG project in Thurston County. So that is our request, but because we're asking for 2060 funds to replace that, we want to come to the RHC with the request that you have purview over those $2060. As I've outlined, we do currently have a fund balance in 2060 minus kind of our outstanding commitments. I feel like we have a sufficient fund balance that we could reduce that by $100,000 without negatively impacting our ability to fund future 2060 projects. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a little complicated, but happy to answer any questions from anyone on this request.
That's a tricky dance there you did, Tom.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions? Clark? Oh, thumbs up from Clark. Okay, good. All right. Are you looking for approval, formal
Yes.
approval? All right. So can I hear a motion to approve the plan that Tom just set forward to do some swapping of funds in order to let Homes First ADUs go forward?
So moved.
You hear a second?
I'll second.
All righty. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Sounds like we have unanimous approval on that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That was some fancy juggling there to try to make all that work. And I really appreciate Tom's extensive knowledge of how all these funding sources work and what the criteria are. And sometimes it feels like if you start pulling a thread, you could potentially unravel a whole lot. So hats off to you, Tom. Alrighty. Wow, we are way ahead of schedule. So let's have some fun with good of the order here. We already took care, I think, of the item that I was going to request. So, and this will be our last meeting this month. So why don't we start with Thurston County, good of the order.
Thanks. Nothing really from the county, although I see Tom's hand up. Tom?
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up on what you were saying. So the recommendation, we haven't kind of said it explicitly, is there is an RHC meeting scheduled for next week. After discussion with the tech team today, we don't have anything pressing for your agenda next week. So we would recommend canceling next week's meeting and then in March, going back to the regular schedule of the first meeting of the month the second week. And then in March, the tech team will then work and come forward in March with a plan for moving towards a hybrid meeting approach, as we discussed, was it last month, around moving to perhaps more in-person meetings, and then a schedule for the next 3 months of key topics to touch base on. But so our recommendation is canceling next week's meeting that is on the calendar. We don't have anything pressing for the RHC for next week.
Okay. Would you like a motion to make that formal?
I don't know if we need it to be formal, but if anyone, unless people really want to meet next week, we can go ahead and cancel that.
Okay, I think you see consensus to council here. Jacinda, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, Carolyn, mine is up on a different topic, so if there's more discussion on the meetings, we can have that. If we're ready to move on, I'm happy to switch gears a little bit.
I think we came to agreement on the meeting schedule, so.
So just wanted to give everyone an update on the Franz Anderson permanent supportive housing work. So that solicitation of interest will go out this Friday. And that will solicit Friday the 17th, excuse me. That will solicit responses to develop, design, develop, construct permanent supportive housing on those 5 west parcels along Franz Anderson Road Southeast. Within that solicitation, we are also asking for respondents to commit to phase development. So phase 1 being the permanent supportive housing, and then phase 2 being just across the street there on that 6th parcel, which will soon have the tiny home village, temporary tiny home village. So asking for phase 2 for respondents again to propose a project that would be affordable housing, meeting the need identified in TRPC's housing gaps assessment or needs assessment, excuse me. That will be out through March 27th, due at noon, March 27th. So it is a short time frame that it will be out. We are communicating within that SOI that there's a regional commitment of approximately 6.7 million for development of phase 1, that permanent supportive housing, as well as some of the other incentives that City of Olympia offers or could potentially offer depending on the selected developer and project. There will be a March 8th site visit, which is also listed in the SOI for anyone that's interested in walking the property or learning more. And then also a March 15th kind of question and answer session for anyone that wants to jump on Zoom and have any outstanding questions after the site visit or otherwise. So just wanted to make sure that you all were well aware that that's going out. It'll be on City of Olympia's site. I can certainly forward it to anyone if you all want to share as well. And then also, if there's any questions that you have now or coming up, I am available to answer those. And then we currently, our timeline is to be reviewing those responses about mid-April. We would take them, kind of update the Regional Housing Council, take them to our City Council May 9th, I believe. And then shortly after, I've coordinated with Ryan and Brad on getting that to an update to both Lacey and Tumwater on the selected development team and kind of more information about the projects at that point. So that's our timeline, and things are moving ahead and they're moving quick, and I'm here for questions and can also be reached by phone or email if something comes up later as well.
Jacinda, I guess I hadn't realized that the tiny home village was not intended to stay there. Can you just give us a little bit more of the thinking on that?
Yes, yes. So I will try to be somewhat brief, but just a reminder, so the tiny home villages will be constructed on that east parcel. So closer to the to I-5. And that project is something that we received regionally, we received funding from the state rights of way and safety initiative. And then city is also currently doing some work. Our public works department is doing some work to bring some utilities down to the site. So the intent is once that is up, about 50 homes, and I think we're hoping maybe fall. And Rich, please step in if I'm communicating that incorrectly. That would temporarily be a place for those being moved out of the right-of-ways, one of several. And then through that rights-of-way initiative, the region was given some operating dollars as well for approximately 3 years. So the thought is that it would operate through that time that we have operating dollars coming from the state Department of Commerce. And then it would, and in the meantime, the permanent supportive housing piece would be in this first year or two, gathering that financing stack and constructing that 15 to 18 month construction period, and then be available ideally when the tiny home village is shut down. So there's a place for those coming out of the tiny home village to transition into more permanent housing. And that also has been communicated in or will be communicated when it's released Friday in the solicitation, that the intent is for the individuals in that tiny home village to kind of have a place or first priority in the permanent supportive housing project.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. Any questions for Jacinda Clark?
There we go. I was just going to give you the less technical politician's 30-second elevator speech version of that, which is we've been trying to move where quickly we can stand up the tiny houses to get people in some sort of shelter, and then to leverage the infrastructure that we bring into that piece of land where we put the tiny houses to be another encouragement for building permanent housing on that, and move on to another parcel with the tiny houses. But I think, you know, with our State Street initial mitigation site and with the Plum Street location, as well as Frand Anderson, we're imagining that we're setting the stage for permanent affordable housing to be in that place, or permanent supportive housing, and that we also see the need continuing. So we'll continue to move this inventory of tiny houses, I think, but that's how I'm framing it. So.
Okay. Thank you for that.
That's just what I was also going to clarify, that it's being built as a temporary facility under emergency rules. And also, we are hopeful that we'll be able to get our design done here within the next month or so, and then be able to move to construction this spring, early summer is our hope. It's a lot to pull together in that time frame, but we remain hopeful about that.
Gotta have hope, huh?
Gotta
Great.
have hope.
Yay. Okay. How about Tumwater? What's new and good there?
No, I don't have too much to add. I was going to say that we have the agreement on our agenda for our next meeting, but we mentioned that earlier. But Brad, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
The council passed the rental registration ordinance at your
Oh,
last.
yeah.
Rental registration?
Yes.
Yeah, we created an ordinance where apartments where you have 5 or more contiguous units have to register as businesses with the city. That's sort of a means for us to be able to distribute information to those complexes about tenant protection measures. We passed those to basically align with what Olympia passed, more or less. There's a couple things that are slightly different, but so we now have pretty much aligned timelines for notice to tenants, and most of the provisions that you guys passed were included, with the exception of, I think, the pet one is not included in our ordinances.
That was a very bitter contested issue, so we left that one alone. In adding to Councilmember Althauser's comments, the city is also going to be coming out in the next few weeks with a very aggressive social media information campaign for all property owners who are also renting property in the city, to let them know of the requirements the council passed in both December and this recent rental registration. So we're hoping we'll be able to start to reach as many people as we can with that.
Great.
I really appreciate that update. Thank you both. I have a question for the rental housing registry. You said 5 or more contiguous units. So they are, you know, it's like a multifamily housing type situation. Okay.
Yeah.
It's either a
so if
property or a series of properties with 5 or more units.
And just so you know, the pet deposit thing was contested with us as well. We'll let you know how it goes.
I was joking about that. I think we didn't go there, but it's always available for us.
Okay. Well, I already mentioned that Lacey is going to be taking up the interlocal agreement this week when we meet Thursday. And Rick and Ryan, do you all have anything that you want to we'll throw on the table there for good of the order?
Yeah, I'll throw something out. It's moving forward. Last Thursday night, the city council adopted the work program for the planning commission. And of course, a lot of that has to do with getting ready for the 2025 comprehensive plan update, and also updating the housing element and plan with the recent work of the housing action plan. One of the recommendation strategies out of that is also going to go forward is to conduct a study this year related to mobile home parks and look at options for preserving mobile home parks or best practices towards that end to preserve space for affordable housing as well as affordable housing for seniors. So that's a process that will be undertaken this year. Ryan will be heading that up, and we'll keep everybody informed as that progresses of what we find out in that study and analysis.
Okay. Ryan, did you have anything you'd like to share?
I'll just add that, we're happy to finally announce that we have a housing coordinator position that was hit the streets this week with a closing date about 3 weeks away. So help is on the way. We're very happy to have that position here now with the city and look forward to that getting filled. And additionally, as Rick mentioned, we'll also have an intern helping us with that mobile home study, if you will. And we're actually excited with that too. That's a pilot project to get an exiting member of the military. So somebody that is a career military in their last 6 months of service, they're actually going to be essentially a city employee working here 4 or 5 days a week, but then still making their military salary while they're exiting in their last 6 months to give them some civilian experience as well. So pilot project, we're really excited about getting some help in doing some inventory and other analysis with that mobile home project. So some good news on the staffing fronts here in Lacey.
Yeah, and just to add on, if anybody knows anybody out there that is interested in a housing coordinator position, please send them our way, and we'll get the announcement out. So if you can share it amongst your circles, that'd be great.
Congratulations, Lacey. That's super cool on both of those. So this pilot project with the intern, you said something about a mobile home study. Can you say more about what the intern's going to be doing?
Well, yeah, looking at the manufactured home parks, it's going to be looking at inventorying the various parks within the Lacey and the Lacey UGA. Going to be looking at condition assessment, demographics, surrounding land uses, and then doing research on best practices from across the state or the country on how manufactured home parks are either protected, preserved, or provide options for those residents in case of sale. So it's really going to take a deep dive and try to figure out what are the menu of options, depending on, I would expect, depending on the location of a park, the condition of the park, and the surrounding land uses, so that there may be different options for different applications. Because you also have to look at it in competing with other vision and planning efforts, like say the Martin Way corridor, or is trying with high transit, what do you do for redevelopment, reinvestment, and infill? So we're going to try to balance all those different pieces and eventually provide the Lacey City Council or the Planning Commission and Lacey City Council with some options that they can look at and make some informed choices.
That's really cool. I applaud you guys for taking that on, and look forward to seeing the results, because it sounds like something that we should also be doing in Olympia.
Thank you. And I would just say that Tumwater has already, I think, is way ahead of all of us on mobile home park preservation. So anything you all would like to say about the work that you've done, or whether you have something that you'd like to share with your sister cities here?
I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before in these meetings. I mean, what we did was we sort of recognized that was happening too in Tumwater, where some of the parks were being redeveloped. So we zoned so that the only thing you could have there in those lots is mobile homes. So the zoning overlay doesn't allow development into a large complex or something else. The result of that has largely been successful. Like the goal was preservation, and I think that's been achieved in the areas where we've done that. It was not without expense. I think that it went to the state Supreme Court when we did that. Brad and Joan just might have more knowledge about that. Joan, you were around when that happened, I think. And so there was significant litigation expense as a result of that, but the end result was successful, and our rules withstood that challenge.
Yeah, the only other issue I'd add to that is, while the preservation of the units themselves as manufactured homes and manufactured home parks has, I think, been addressed, the cost of for people living in those in particular units is still a challenge. And we have been exploring other ways of trying to deal with that, like similar to a land trust. But we've been talking with nonprofit groups about the ways to do that, but we obviously need willing owners and willing tenants to deal with that.
Yeah, I've always thought there used to be a state law that provided the folks who lived in places in mobile home parks that they had the right of first refusal to purchase. So if the seller was trying to sell the land, then the tenants who were renting the land, they own the mobile homes but rent the land, then they would have the right to essentially form a collective and have the right of first refusal to purchase that. That law was found unconstitutional in, I think, the 90s or so. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think it probably involves, some of the goals that you set out, Ryan and Rick, in terms of establishing relationships with not just the people who own the homes there, but the park owners, so that if there ever is a desire to sell, those relationships are established. And then the purchase could be made by the people who live there, so they could kind of control their own future and destiny in that sense. So we can't require an owner to sell to someone or not. So the only way to really get around that is to just have willing parties on both sides of the table, I think.
I agree. And that's one of the efforts too with this process of defining what's the engagement strategy and getting connection with not only the tenants, but also the park owners, which can be difficult because there are some that are out of state or out of county type ownerships. And you struck another thought that this might be something that we look at as a region some point, Councilor Hauser, is, the state laws related to the right of first refusal, but also there's supposed to be a fund at the state level to help with displacement or mitigation for relocation, but that's been always severely underfunded. And there's never been enough funding there to deal with demand in one city, much less a county or the state. And so as we look at this study, we're going to look at those different options of, well, is this something, a particular location, is it should be a land use designation that preserves it, or should it be need to provide housing reassistance or relocation assistance, and what's that look like? But that's another piece with that state assistance, is funding that account so that it's actually meaningful and helpful when these situations arise.
Okay. Well, I'd like to keep that topic on the table here and look at what we can do collectively on it. I think we can provide maybe by summer some sort of at least check-in update from Lacey and see where we are. I remember talking when the Mountain Green Mobile Home Park here in Lacey approached me a couple of times about, they were worried because they have foreign, well, at least out of state ownership, and they were worried that the park could get sold out from under them. There's a state land trust group that assists mobile home park residents with buying their park and helps them with the framework and all that they need to accomplish that. So it's a resource that's out there.
I just want to make a comment of
Yeah.
yours, about this, just simply, you all probably know this just by common sense, but when you get into this, there's such a difference in the people who live in these homes. There's upscale totally, and then the people who need the most are people who could no more afford to buy their property than they could fly to the moon. And so you always have to keep that in mind when you're doing this or looking for people to help out or what applies where. There's just a wide range in those parks. So, but it's a kudos to you for taking this on, and any way we can be help with any of the information. It's old, but it's working sort of. And in Tumwater, we're definitely willing to, pass that on or sit down and talk.
And I gather you prevailed in the Supreme Court.
We did.
So Tumwater's that case law.
Thanks for taking that one for the team.
Yeah. That was one thing with our attorney. Never seen her so happy. Yeah.
That's great. All righty. Well, anybody have anything else for the good of the order? All righty. Well, thanks, everybody. Great meeting. And we'll see you back in March. Take care.
You. Mhm.
Bye.